Progress is a 4-year research project financed by the Gates Foundation that tries to measure, understand and communicate to a broad audience what works in development and why. We define progress or development progress quite broadly to include 8 different dimensions, going from material well-being to health to education, but also issues like governance, access to decent work and social cohesion. We focus on progress rather than success. This means that the job is not done. Many of the countries we are looking at still have quite a long way to go. We also recognize that not all good things come together. Sometimes countries make huge progress in certain dimensions while they are still lagging in others. A lot of progress has been made in recent years, but often stories of failure overshadow those of success. In the last 2 decades, average real incomes have doubled. 660 million people have been lifted out of poverty, and life expectancy has increased by 4 years. All regions in the world have shared in these gains, but not all countries or all people within those countries. The gains have also come at some cost of environmental degradation and inequality. So it is vital that we try to understand the where, the what, the how and the why of progress, because better understanding how progress has been made makes it more likely that it will be repeated elsewhere. We also have not been very good at communicating progress and results more generally. Recent public opinion research carried out by ODI shows that citizens don't really understand what we are talking about in the development community, and they would like to hear more about where progress has been made and why. So in this project we try to address these issues. We try to present progress in a clear and lively manner, albeit based on the highest standard of technical research. Well, so far we've shown convincingly that progress is happening around the world and that it is happening in many challenging and unexpected places. We found many stories of progress in Africa, for example. In this phase, we will continue trying to identify and measure progress and find countries around the world where progress is happening. We also have found that even though there's no magic recipe, that progress is driven by a number of key ingredients. For example, leadership, evidence-based policy making, effective and innovative delivery mechanisms, and partnerships with public and private sectors. In this phase, we will dig deeper into those drivers of progress, and we will also pay particular attention to financing of progress and look at how progress has been resourced, what kind of channels or delivery mechanisms have been used, and what mechanisms of accountability have been present. Finally, we will be looking at the relationship between dimensions and which countries have been able to achieve progress across multiple dimensions at the same time. We will be looking at the trade-offs between those dimensions and how they can be reduced. For example, which countries have been able to achieve industrialization while also limiting environmental damage, or which countries have been able to grow while also distributing those gains equally. There are problems at 2 levels here. First, there is a lack of reliable and consistent data over time, and we are trying to identify the best possible data for our work. Secondly, there is a lack of clarity around the types of measures that we use to identify progress. And the MDGs haven't been entirely helpful in this respect. For example, some measures, some MDG goals measure progress in terms of achieving full coverage in health or full coverage in education. As a result, countries that start from a very low base, for example 25%, those goals are very difficult to achieve. They're laudable but very hard to achieve. Equally, the MDGs use relative measures. They look at progress relative to initial conditions, for example, reducing by half or reducing by 2/3. Again, that actually affects countries that are starting from a very low base, from worse initial conditions, because it's harder in some cases for them to achieve the targets or to achieve progress. So using some of the MDG measures and targets as a measure of progress often discriminates against very low income countries. And it has led to the perception that those countries are not making progress at all, while in fact, many of those countries have made huge progress in health and education. Equally, there's also an issue around distribution. Some countries show huge progress in terms of aggregate measures, or when you look at it in the national level, but then when you look at who actually has benefited from that progress, we see often it's not the poor, it's the richer parts of population. So given that we're interested in poverty reduction, it is important that we look at how the poor are faring in any story of progress. In the next few months, we'll be producing some think pieces around some of the questions we will be looking at in the next couple of years, 2 to 3 years. Those think pieces will be available on the website, so I encourage people to come and have a look at it. In July, for example, we'll be focusing on the results of the Rio+20 conference and kind of what we can learn from that or take away from that in terms of the future and environmental progress in general.